The world seems to have been taken by surprise, but do you think we should have been surprised by what's happened?
Well, I mean, I think the constitution by which the military has now said will try to take back the peace of the country, that this could have happened at any time at all. So the new constitution, if you like, was drawn up in 2008, and as part of that constitution, 25% of the parliamentary seats were guaranteed and secured to the military, and at any time a state of emergency. And the actions that we're seeing now, what we call a coup, has been pre-written inside this constitution. So in essence, I guess what I'm trying to say is that this isn't actually a coup, because this is legalized as part of the entity of the constitution. And so yes, in that degree and in that spirit, this doesn't come as a surprise. It doesn't come as a shock. And even with Suu Kyi, the leader of the NLD and de facto state council and leader of Myanmar, she has always been at the beck and call and at the whims of the military anyway.
All right. So it's interesting that this was written into the Constitution almost as if it's a get-out-of-jail-free card. If they don't like what's happening in the country, they'll just pull that card and back to where we were.
Absolutely, and that's one of the main reasons why human rights activists and campaigners from around the world were calling for caution, I suppose, in 2012 and 15 when Suu Kyi came to power, to not put all their eggs in one basket and not to even use the term democracy, because it's a democracy when you have military who are guaranteed seats and who have this power to, if you like, pull the plug at any point. And it shows. Last night's events show that this is not a democracy of any type. It's not a fledgling democracy. It's not a developing democracy. It's exactly what it was before, military-led government, and they hold the executive, legislative, and judiciary.
So the question then, I guess, is why now? Why so soon after this election and on the day that the election victory was going to be confirmed in Parliament?
Well, I think the timing, as you've mentioned, today was supposed to be the first day of the new Parliament. So it was important for the military, if they were going to go ahead with this, that they were going to do this before Parliament sat. So that's the timing of it. I think there's a hat tip, if you like, towards Trump. Is very Trumpian. The US elections took place on the 3rd of November. The Myanmarese elections took place on the 8th of November. Those elections in the US were called fraudulent and supporters cried them. And the same has happened in Myanmar. The difference, I suppose, is that one is a democracy and one isn't. Whereas in the US, I suppose democracy to an extent won and shone through. In Burma, that's not the case. In Myanmar, that's not the case. In terms of why they would necessarily decide to pull the plug on Suu Kyi, who's been a willing ally to the military, I think the scale of the victory, 80% or so voted for the NLD. That's quite a sweeping victory in any kind of scale of margin. That's what really unsettled and made the military generals nervous. And also at the end of the day, I think the military, and especially Min Aung Hlaing, the commander-in-chief, it didn't work with him personality to necessarily have this kind of discursive relationship with a civilian government. They wanted to rule in and of themselves.
All right, so where does this leave Myanmar now? Are we going to see sanctions? Condemnation is coming, yes, left, right and centre. But they would have done the calculations, I guess, that, yes, we'll do this, people will be upset, but we carry on. Do you think that they've miscalculated what world anger might be, or are they going to get away with it?
Well, that's quite a deep question. I'll try to answer it on two fronts. I think what's going to happen in Myanmar is should be at the forefront of all of our minds. Of course, we know that this particular military has not only exercised the genocide against Rohingya people, but it's also committed crimes against humanity and war crimes on other ethnic groups like the Karen, the Shan, and the Kachin. So that's a very deep worry in terms of rights and freedom freedoms within Myanmar and for the people of Myanmar. That's of course of paramount concern. When we look externally and internationally, yes, there has been some condemnation. I don't think as of yet there's been a strong enough condemnation. I understand that the UN Security Council will discuss this issue tomorrow as well. I wouldn't be too hopeful. The track record from the UN Security Council on Myanmar has not been great in the past. They haven't actually come together with any resolution, even when the genocide against the Rohingya was going on. In terms of legitimizing, I think from what I understand from our sources, we understand that the military was actually incommunicado with China, with Japan, with India, and with other regional powers, and they almost passed this through them before going through an institute again last night. So it almost has the wish, if you like, or the approval of regional powers. Really, sanctions would be the way to go if there's going to be a global leadership on this issue. I think the Burmese military, the government as such, they also understand that there is a degree of liberal capitalism where there is a huge interest from foreign investment and foreign. And, you know, the military that we see, the military grade equipment that we see, the tanks on they're also not Burmese manufactured. You know, a lot of them have roots in France and Ukraine, and coming through the proxy seller, which seems to be Israel as well. So there is support, I suppose, for the military-led government. And whilst there might be diplomatic coordination, I don't think actually bilaterally and in a scenario, much will change. I think many countries, and that in itself is legitimizing the Burmese approach right now.
Let's talk about Aung San Suu Kyi, because her situation is a bit complicated. You have, on the one hand, a Nobel Peace Prize winner who helped to bring some form of a civilian influence in the country. We're not sure now, given what the military have done, just how in charge she actually was. But then there was the evidence that she gave at the International Criminal Court of Justice defending the army against what they did to the Rohingyas. What do we make of this? Because she obviously at this point has to decide which way she goes. Can she save her legacy, perhaps?
I don't think she has any decision left, to be honest with you. I think she had a decision to make in 2015, and the decision at that time was to be out with the military command. And I think a decision to not shout down and be vociferous in condemnation of the Rohingya attacks. I think her willingness, actually, not even just condemnation, she's actually gone the other way. She's willingly gone to the International Court of Justice. There was no demand on her to do so. There was no how to do so. She chose to do that of her own accord. She goes and speak in support of the military that instituted this genocide. So I think the decision was already made. I think what now is that even despite her move towards allyship of the military, she has been ousted from any sort of control. And I think, you know, the decision that she made in 2015 and subsequent years to cozy up with the military, perhaps of her personality, which was rather than this imaginary poster girl of democracy and freedoms, perhaps what we were actually faced with Suu Kyi was the pragmatic, real, kind of power hungry and wanting to power in any way, shape, and form, and that included getting into bed with the military, which she openly had been fractious with in the past, which had openly held her under. Now continues to do so. The military has remained consistent. Suu Kyi has not, and I think she's ultimately right now paying the price for that.
All right, so you said getting into bed with the military, but given what's happened now, is there a possibility that she was never really in control, and where she appeared to be cozying up to the army, she was actually acting under instruction?
Absolutely, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think it's quite clear, it's quite obvious, it's quite profound that she was acting as almost a puppet. Firstly, she wasn't given any official title; she was given this title of state councillor. This isn't a position that falls within the constitution. This is a position that was created. That already tells you that she almost had some of her executive powers taken away from her. She wasn't in control of all of the departments of the Myanmar government. For example, the big departments such as the Ministry of Defence, Foreign Affairs, etc. They were all under military control anyway. And I think, even her standing in front of ICJ all pointed towards puppeteering almost, and cajoling towards the military. I don't think really she was ever really in control of Myanmar as a state. I think there's a very real possibility that this arrest that's been made for Suu Kyi, we may see a reversal of that. The military may bring her out and use her again as a face of democracy to legitimize their ultimate control. And I think she'll probably be a willing partner in that struggle.
All right. She's called on people to protest this. Will they heed the call? I mean, she is hugely popular inside the country.
Well, there was quite some confusion about this call for protest. There was a number of different lines that were hearing. Firstly, we heard that Suu Kyi had made a request for protest. That was apparently issued last week, so before the coup. The NLD subsequently then released a statement saying to come out onto the streets and protest. And I think there's good reason for the confusion here, because the precedent, past record, track records, protests in Myanmar have never really gone down well. There's always been violence, and the military are not shy of opening fire on their own. If really there was any sort of, and perhaps there may be in the coming days, I think we can expect violence to roar out on the streets of Mandalay and Naypyidaw.
If China backs Myanmar, a year from now, might we still be in the same position where the military are running things and extend their state of emergency? Or do you think they will be forced eventually to try this civilian government, quasi-government project again?
I think internally, so again within Myanmar, the military are not bound by anything. They have ultimate control, and they will do as they please. I think the only real leverage there may be is external. So if the condemnation and if the realization of sanctions is tough and quick enough, then perhaps in a year's time we may see something more like quasi-civilian. Again, going by the past and going by recent records, I don't think actually now that Min Aung Hlaing has landed himself the top job, that he will release easily. And I also don't think that the condemnation community will be quite so. I don't think there's going to be any against Burma. I don't think there's going to be any arms embargo or trade embargoes or severe sanctions placed on Myanmar. And I say this only and purely based on the fact that a genocide happening in our time has been widely reported, has been recognized by the UN and by the ICC and the ICJ, the top courts in the world, did not want any type of sanction from any meaningful power in the world. The sanctions that we saw against individuals and against foreign assets, which are meaningless anyway. So if in the face of a genocide there cannot be sanctions, I very much doubt that in the face of a military we can expect any more. It's bleak for Myanmar, I think, for the people of Myanmar, and especially for the ethnic minorities. This is also an opportunity for some global leadership. And I hope that the global world and leaders and governments across the world actually do listen and hear the calls of activists and organizations, Restless Beings and other organizations that speak on this, and actually decide to come forward and act.
All right, so we're going to have to leave it there. We're struggling a little bit with the connection now, but thanks so much indeed for those insights and what's happening on the ground in Myanmar. And let's hope that the people do find a solution and that some form of democracy can start coming back to that country in the near future. Thanks so much indeed for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
All right, that's Mabrur Ahmed, who's the founder-director of Restless Beings, talking to us about the situation in Myanmar, where Aung San Suu Kyi has been arrested, detained with other democratically elected leaders. Her party had just gained an 80% vote win, and the army said, well, we're not having that. And they've declared a state of emergency, and the top general is now the president.